High above the fractured landscape, the moon reigned like a queen whose pale glow offered the only safe light. Beneath its muted brilliance, a small band of survivors gathered near the remains of a shattered bridge. They had waited all day, tucked away in abandoned subway tunnels, to emerge at dusk. No one dared travel by day anymore, not since the sun's radiation began searing everything it touched. Rumors spoke of ravaged towns and scorched forests, all incinerated under a relentless solar fury that grew more powerful with each sunrise. Eliana crouched behind a collapsed concrete barrier, her dark hair braided down her back. She flicked on her greenish night vision goggles, scanning the street ahead with a practiced efficiency. The once bustling center of Salmon City had turned into a desolate stretch of cracked asphalt. Warped streetcar tracks crisscrossed the road, jutting out like broken bones. The city's few remaining standing structures were charred black and collapsed in places, windows long shattered by temperature fluctuations. At night, the radiated heat was bearable, but the gloom demanded a new type of war. One fought between those who ventured into the darkness for resources and the monstrous consequences of the sun's malevolence. Ice, Eliana's wiry and quick-witted companion, crept closer. He looked askance with his uncovered right eye, the left concealed by an old bandage. "I've scouted ahead. The supply depot at the corner's broken open. Probably another group tried to raid it earlier." He paused, swallowing, "But I saw movement around. Could be those Luma raiders again." Eliana didn't respond immediately. She knew better than to let the faint glimmers of hope or fear show. The Luma raiders were a ruthless gang that had adapted to the new nocturnal world by trading away their last vestiges of morality. They considered themselves the true heirs of the night, hunting weaker survivors for belongings and, occasionally, for sport. She would not let her group be fodder for them. Marisol, tall with close-cropped hair, brushed dust off her shoulders and shifted her rifle. "If we can't grab enough supplies tonight, we'll need to move on. The tunnels below the city are overrun with desperate souls, and the contamination levels are rising by the day. Some folks are showing signs of radiation sickness already, even at night." No one wanted to linger in a city that offered neither shelter nor comfort. More menacing than the daily intensifying sun was the knowledge that, when dawn arrived, anything, or anyone, left above ground would be scorched beyond recognition. Eliana made the decision. "We go in, quick and quiet. If we see the Luma raiders, we back off. Understood?" A tug of apprehension pulled on her heart. Another night, another raid, another gamble with survival. But there was no time for fear. They left cover and slunk down the decimated road, careful to avoid making noise on the cracked asphalt. One misstep could send a shard of brittle pavement clattering, echoing through the silent ruins. The supply depot once held crates of food, medical gear, and clothing. Judging by the chaos at its front, others had arrived first. Half-smashed pallets and twisted metal shelves were scattered along the floor. Wooden boxes had been pried open and rifled through. Shards of broken glass crunched underfoot. It was the first sign of trouble. They weren't alone. Ice flashed a hand signal. Two shapes near the back. From her vantage point, Eliana only caught faint silhouettes. She signaled for Marisol to circle around the outer edge of the building. Then, carefully placing each step, Eliana and Ice approached the front. As they neared one of the crates, the pungent odor of rotting food forced them to exhale softly in disgust. The contents of many packages had spoiled, evidently left there during the early days of the catastrophe. As they swept their night vision goggles across the dark interior, Eliana's stomach sank. Shelves were picked clean, and only a few fragments of dried beef jerky or battered cans remained. Bags of supplies had been sliced open. Either a vicious band of scavengers had come through, or the Luma raiders had made a messy visit, leaving any less enticing goods to rot. A low, scuffling sound made Eliana freeze. She squinted, two forms hunched over a battered metal crate. From the stench, it might once have contained powdered milk or dehydrated vegetables. Marisol signaled from the back, indicating these two might be unarmed or at least less threatening than the raiders. Eliana took a step forward, pressing her back against a shelving unit. "We're not here to fight," she called out quietly, voice firm but calm. "You can share what's left." The two silhouettes jerked upright. One was short and stocky, while the other stood a head taller, trembling. They shuffled out of the shadows, revealing wide, frightened eyes and threadbare clothes. Eliana approached, adopting a posture that was simultaneously apologetic and vigilant. "We just want to gather what we can." A flicker of relief shifted across the stocky figure's face. "We've been here for hours," the figure whispered. "We found barely anything." She held up one can, its label peeled off. "Might be soup. We don't know." Eliana nodded slowly. She glanced at Ice, who relaxed slightly, though he still gripped his hunting knife. They all knew food was scarce, and no one could afford to relinquish what little supplies existed. Yet in this post-apocalyptic world, sometimes cooperation was the only way. "We can't blame you for taking it," Eliana said. "We're all in the same predicament. There are rumors of better stock in the old supermarkets near the canal, so maybe we'll try there next." Before the exchange could go further, a noise from outside rattled through the broken entrance. The sharp rev of a small engine. A motorcycle, or maybe an improvised vehicle. Everyone froze, gazes darting from one to the next. Anxiety churned in the heavy air. Lumirators like to drive vehicles at night, headlights cut off, scouring the darkness for victims. Eliana motioned for them to douse any lights and crouched behind the splintered shelving. After the revving grew louder, they saw a narrow beam of a flashlight skim across the building's rafters. Shadows danced on the walls. Eliana's heartbeat pounded in her ears. She pressed herself against the cold steel shelf, mentally mapping all possible exits. The front door was too close to where the raiders might come in. The rear exit led to a twisted alleyway, but that route was equally risky. She suspected the group might be large, given the racket. An aggressive voice pierced the gloom. "Search the place. If anyone's here, we flush them out." The sound of heavy boots scraping against broken glass brought further dread. Ice swallowed hard, looking to Eliana. She motioned toward the rear exit. Marisol nodded from across the room. The stocky scavenger and her friend were trembling. Eliana nodded for them to follow. Staying put would be a death sentence. Together they moved deeper into the building. Glass and debris shifted underfoot, each inch of progress excruciatingly slow. Adrenaline spiked when they heard the Lumirators rummaging around near the front. One ransacked a rusted file cabinet, cursing at the worthless scraps of paper inside. Light beams swung across the floor, revealing greasy tire marks and old footprints. The group held their breath, creeping toward the back door that was half buried behind cartons of rotting produce. Eliana tested the back door's handle. It squeaked in protest, forcing her to twist it inch by inch until she could open it wide enough to slip through. Ice edged past quickly, scanning the outside alley for more foes. The outside was silent, no sign of additional raiders. Marisol eased out next, followed by the two strangers and Eliana last. They hugged the wall, hearts pounding. From the street, more engine noise erupted. Eliana crouched and signaled everyone to move in single file, quiet as ghosts. They made their way down the alley, stepping over mounds of rubble. Acrid smoke clung to the night air, the residue of fires and industry from a time that now seemed like a distant dream. Within minutes, they were outside the immediate glow of the building. Safely hidden behind a collapsed fence, they watched as the raiders regrouped out front. Glimmers of scuffling and raised voices echoed in the darkness. A battered dune buggy rammed into the supply depot's front entrance, sending up a cloud of debris. The raiders were thorough in their brutality. They had no regard for what might be left of the building's structural integrity. The structure groaned as if in final protest. Then, a crash. Part of the roof caved in. From across the distance, Eliana could see twisted metal and plumes of dust fill the air. Ice winced. If there was anything left worth taking, it's gone now. He dared to let out a shaky sigh. "We should get out of here." "Just one place left to check tonight, then we head back underground before sunrise," Eliana replied. She turned to the two scavengers who had followed them. They still clutched their single can of unknown contents. "Join us if you like. We're heading down by the canal to look for a large supermarket. More supplies may still be there, though we don't know what condition it's in." The shorter woman nodded eagerly. "We will come. Can't stay in the open. Thank you for helping us." Clouds drifted across the moon, and an uneasy stillness returned to the broken cityscape. The group ventured forth, weaving around chunks of concrete and rusting cars, past a long dead traffic light whose structure leaned precariously. The only clue that this had once been a hustle-bustle city was the battered skyline, where a few skyscrapers stood half-skeletal, their windows reflecting no light. A meltdown of normalcy had left only malignant shadows of modern civilization. They approached the canal by winding through a series of side streets and narrow walkways. The canal's stale water reeked of chemicals, a swirling cesspool of debris. Once, pleasure boats would have docked along these edges. Now wrecked vessels lay half-submerged, forming silhouettes of twisted metal. Near the largest wreck, a chain-link fence ringed the property housing the supermarket. Its sign had toppled, leaving only a broken neon letter flickering against the gloom. Marisol sneaked forward to check the gate. "Looks like someone forced it open recently," she whispered. Eliana moved to her side. A padlock dangled. Broken, she gently pushed the gate open. It let out a soft groan. "Knife and rifles ready," she said. They advanced slowly into the darkness, halting when a rancid smell wafted their way. Something rotting, perhaps old produce, or, worst-case scenario, a sign of corpses. Holding their breath, they inched into the store's side entrance, where large glass doors would once have responded to any motion, but were now shattered. Shards crunched underfoot. Inside, rows of shelving seemed to loom out of the darkness. Many aisles had collapsed, burying products beneath twisted metal, but enough remained upright to offer potential salvage. Marisol tried a quick scan with her flashlight, dimmed to the lowest setting. Pale beams revealed streaks of dried blood smeared across the floor. It could have been from a scuffle days or weeks before. They continued onward, stepping over shattered display stands. The group broke off into pairs, Eliana and Marisol, Ice and the two strangers. Quietly they searched for anything still edible. Cans, sealed boxes, anything out of the sun's irreversible decay. Half of the aisles were worthless. Rodents had chewed through many packages, and the stale air reeked of contamination. Eliana found a few battered cans of beans, lids bulging slightly. If they were still safe, the group could glean a meal or two. She kept searching, stomach twisting at the possibility of radiation. Marisol whistled softly from another aisle, and Eliana joined her. The taller woman knelt beside the remains of a refrigerated section. A row of metal lockers near the back demanded attention. They were sealed with thick padlocks. "Might be worth a shot," Marisol murmured. She tapped one of the locks. "Could be emergency supplies, maybe meds." Eliana nodded. She got out a crowbar from her pack. Wedging it against the padlock, she pushed with all her might. The lock groaned, then snapped. Dust billowed as she opened the metal door. Inside, her flashlight revealed a shelf of vacuum-sealed survival rations, pouches of powdered eggs, dried fruits, a couple of water filtration tablets. She exhaled in relief. This was a jackpot in the new world. Silently, they packed it away, distributing the weight between their backpacks. They left a few items for the others. As they moved onto the next locker, a scream tore through the silence. Eliana jolted, dropping the crowbar with a clang. The sound came from somewhere in the store, Ice's direction. Marisol and Eliana dashed toward the noise, weaving around toppled crates. They spotted the shorter scavenger huddled behind a checkout counter, eyes wide with terror. Blood trickled from a cut on her arm. "They got him," she gasped, voice trembling. "The other raider grabbed Ice." Eliana's blood went cold. She raised a hand, urging Marisol to be cautious. Over the distant hum of the city's unsettled night, she could hear scuffling footsteps. Someone was dragging something heavy. Suppressing a wave of fear, Eliana motioned for the scavenger to stay put. Then she and Marisol advanced. Around the corner, they found signs of a struggle. An overturned metal cart, skid marks on the floor, a can of beans rolling in a lazy circle. Farther ahead, the store's back exit was ajar. Leaning against the warped metal door, Eliana peered out into a dark lot behind the supermarket. Among scattered pallets and trash bags, a silhouette hovered, two men forcing a third bound figure into an old van. "Ice," The large silhouette barking orders must have been a raider. Another figure in the driver's seat started the engine, rattling ominously in the quiet night. Eliana gestured. Marisol kept her rifle raised. "Release him," Eliana snarled, stepping out cautiously. She aimed her own weapon at the raider's torso. The raider glanced over with cold eyes. He was tall, with a shaved head, and carried an automatic rifle. Next to him stood another raider, smaller but equally fearsome, holding a makeshift club. Ice lay on the ground, wrists pinned behind his back. A swollen bruise marred his cheek. The smaller raider barked out a nasty laugh. "Better drop your weapons and move along, or your friend's done." Ileana's mind raced. She glanced at Marisol, who kept her aim steady. The tension crackled like static in the air. One shot and everything could spiral out of control. The tall raider lifted his rifle in a half-threatening gesture. "We're short on supplies. Your buddy here'll help us find a stash. Or we test out a new game we've been wanting to play." Marisol grit her teeth. "We have no intention of letting you take him." At that, the tall raider cocked his weapon. The muzzle glinted under the moonlight. Eliana's stomach twisted. She was confident in her marksmanship, but the punishing scenario made her heart pound. If she shot one, the other might shoot Ice. If she hesitated, they could drive off with him. Time stretched like taffy, each moment a hazard. Eliana recalled that the sun would rise in a few hours. Already the air felt warmer, an unspoken threat. She had to act quickly and cunningly. She let out a breath. "Listen, I know how this world works. You want supplies? We do too. We found some inside, but not much. We know of a bigger stash in an underground bunker. Let my friend go and we'll tell you where it is." Beside her, Marisol's face flickered with confusion, but she kept her stance resolute. Eliana was bluffing, but maybe it was enough to stall or force a deal. The tall raider's eyes narrowed. "Really now? Where?" Eliana forced a cool facade, praying he wouldn't see through her. "Near the easternmost district, under a collapsed church. Someone told us there's a hidden cellar that was used for hurricane relief supplies a decade ago. If it's still sealed, you'd find enough to last a small group for weeks." The two raiders exchanged a glance, clearly enticed by the possibility. The smaller raider's lip curled. "And we're supposed to trust you?" "Not trust," Eliana spat back. "But if you kill or keep my friend, you won't get a word. Let him walk, and we can talk more. If you try anything, we'll fight." She jerked her chin at Marisol, who locked eyes with them, refusing to flinch. A slow smirk spread across the tall raider's face, as though he found the standoff amusing. He pulled Ice to his feet, pressing a gun barrel to his temple. "It's almost dawn, you realize. Not much time left. You sure you want to be a hero?" Eliana held her breath. She knew they were cornered, but maybe so were the raiders. Driving after dawn was suicide. She decided to add pressure. "The sun comes up soon, and you know what that means. No one wants to be out under that radiation. Let him go and I'll give you a precise location. Otherwise, we all burn at dawn." Finally, the tall raider grunted. He loosened his grip on Ice, then shoved him forward. Ice buckled, landing among the trash-strewn ground. Eliana and Marisol quickly pulled him aside, checking for injuries. The tall raiders stepped back to the van. "Talk." Eliana rattled off coordinates for a random location near the outskirts of the city, far from any real shelter. She embellished details: an old wooden cross near the back rooms, a trapdoor hidden by debris, a store of unspoiled rations. The raiders listened intently, their greed outshining any suspicion. Satisfied, the tall raider jerked his head at his ally, and both climbed into the van, slamming the door. The engine roared to life. Eliana, Marisol, and Ice scrambled back into the shadows, hearts hammering as the vehicle rumbled away, taillights and plumes of exhaust disappearing into the gloom. Only when the van was out of sight did they dare breathe. Eliana turned to Ice, unearthing a battered cloth from her bag to wipe the blood from his lip. "You okay?" Ice coughed, shoulders trembling with the release of adrenaline. "Yeah. They surprised me, but I'm alive thanks to you." Marisol helped him stand. "We need to hurry. We've got maybe 3 hours before sunrise. We can't be caught out in the open or it's over." Across exhausted faces, they shared the same thought. Gather the last of the supplies and retreat underground. The city's daytime environment was no mere inconvenience. It was certain death. Already the atmosphere seemed a fraction hotter, a sign that the intensifying radiation was creeping over the horizon. With haste, they regrouped inside. The short scavenger was shaky, but relieved to see Ice back. The group divided the rations from the locked stash, ensuring a fair share for all. Then they fled the supermarket through the side entrance. A hush fell across the city, as if it were bracing for the scorching incandescence soon to rise. The wind kicked up dust devils in the street, swirling them into the night sky. Navigating the battered roads, the survivors clutched their dire prizes, scanning every shadow for danger. No more raiders crossed their path. Either the gang had retreated to plan their next move, or had set off to chase Eliana's fabricated bunker rumor. As the group slipped deeper into the labyrinth of abandoned tunnels, the stifling air pressed against them, an omen of the ultraviolet terror soon to blanket the surface. Their underground refuge was known simply as the Pit. An old subway station expanded into a makeshift complex. Rusty turnstiles had been dismantled and welded into protective barriers. People of various ages and conditions lined the dimly lit corridor, wearing tattered clothes, carrying battered supplies. Tension and desperation clung to them like a second skin. Everyone huddled in small groups, conversing in hushed tones. Some coughed with what sounded like radiation sickness. Eliana, Ice, and Marisol trudged toward a corner alcove they'd claimed as their own. The two scavengers who'd joined them from the supply depot followed hesitantly, wide-eyed at the sight of so many survivors packed together. The Pit was a place of uneasy alliances, though it was somewhat safer than open streets, especially once the sun rose. As they settled down, Eliana offered the short scavenger some ration packs. "I don't think we properly introduced ourselves. My name is Eliana, that's Ice, and this is Marisol." Her voice was tired yet carrying a spark of warmth. The stocky woman gave an exhausted smile. "I'm Cora, and this is my sister Tasha," she said, gesturing to the taller, trembling figure who had remained in the background. Tasha was younger, perhaps in her late teens, with haunted eyes reflecting the toll of survival. "We're in your debt," Cora added, voice trembling with gratitude. "No need for that," Marisol said. "We help each other or we don't make it at all." Voices carried through the concourse. A flicker of electric light from a generator cast jagged shadows on the walls. People rummaged through their packs to compare their night's hauls. Bruised fruit, battered cans, a handful of bullets. It was never enough. Eliana sighed, her limbs burning with fatigue. She sank onto the cold floor, leaning against a concrete column. A wave of frustration and dread swept over her. Each night's scavenge brought fewer gains, and the hours of darkness increasingly felt like a countdown to the next scorching dawn. Ice rubbed a spot on his forehead. "We can't keep doing this. The sun's intensifying faster than we thought. Soon it won't even be safe to come up at twilight. Radiation levels are spiking." Marisol's expression was grim. "There may be bunkers deeper underground. I heard rumors about sealed vaults near the outskirts. If they exist, they might offer a way to outlast the worst of it." Eliana flexed her stiff fingers, recalling the lie she had told the raiders. What if there truly were hidden caches that remained untouched? She had woven that false tale off the top of her head, but who was to say some grain of it wasn't real? The world had been full of secrets and hidden spaces. Now, desperation fueled imagination. Word might spread of her supposed bunker, and packs of fortune seekers might converge on the spot. Meanwhile, the real question was whether the group could find a safer sanctuary to ride out the blazing onslaught of each new day. Cora bowed her head. "We lost our home last week to the sun. The roof collapsed from heat stress, and then came the looters. Tasha was attacked." She glanced at her sister, who turned away, a tear tracing down her dusty cheek. "We have no place else to go." Marisol offered them a few water purification tablets. "That's why we stay together. Safety in numbers." She looked meaningfully at Eliana. though it's never guaranteed. As if reacting to her words, the overhead lights flickered, the old generator sputtering. A hush fell across the station. Silence reigned for a heart-stopping moment. Then, with a rumble, the machine regained some life, and the weak overhead lights buzzed back on. Gasps of relief trickled through the crowd. Everyone understood the fragility of their existence. One mechanical failure, one short circuit, and the pit would plunge into total darkness. Eliana rose to her feet, ignoring the ache in her joints. She walked toward the corner of the station that opened onto a side platform. Old train tracks vanished into the gloom. A ventilation shaft overhead allowed in a whisper of night air, tinted with the first hints of the rising sun's scorching presence. She thought of the city's skeletal towers, the deserted streets, the grocery store crammed with decaying goods. She thought of the lumirators chasing illusions of bounty, perhaps cutting down other survivors in the process. And she thought of the next dawn, which promised to be hotter, deadlier than any before. She didn't have solutions, only a fear coiling in her gut that they would soon be forced to flee even deeper underground. Survival demanded cunning, resourcefulness, and an unwavering defiance of the radiation's scorched world. She raked a hand through her hair, letting out a long, trembling sigh. Footsteps behind her announced Ice's approach. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "We made it back. We have a little more to feed people and keep them going. For tonight, that's enough." Eliana nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She forced a weary smile. "And tomorrow, we'll figure out something else." Soon the sky above would lighten, and the world would burn in that searing glow. For now, the survivors clung to the fleeting calm of darkness. They shared what little food they had, patched each other's wounds, and recounted near-miss encounters with the lumirators. Some prayed, others cursed the sun. In every whispered conversation lingered the knowledge that each dawn brought not warmth and growth, but devastation and ruin. Settling onto a battered sleeping mat, Eliana closed her eyes, though images of ashen ruins and blazing skies kept creeping into her mind. She felt the raw wound of exhaustion, but also the simmer of determination. The new world demanded constant adaptation. Day by day, the sun's radiation intensified, pushing humanity further into the shadows. Yet they still lived, still fought to gather scraps against the unstoppable cosmic assault. Each night, they would continue to scavenge. Each dawn, they would hide. And tomorrow they would do it all over again, until the sun burned too fiercely to be outrun. In the end, that was the only choice left. Embrace the darkness as their ally, become creatures of the night, and hope for a future no longer scorched by the daylight. Survival might be tenuous, but as the night's hours dwindled, Eliana and her companions resolved that, no matter how devastating the dawn, they would be ready to venture out again when the sun set. The night, for all its terrors, was the last refuge of hope in a faithless landscape. And so they clung to it, hearts pounding, pulses thrumming, the unforgiving nightlife of survival.